Hello, I'm Valeria Burstein from Talks Global, and today we're here to learn a little bit more about a well-known initiative in the United States, specifically in North Carolina, the Research Triangle Cleantech Cluster. It is an initiative of business, government, and university and non-profit leaders, all together focused on accelerating the growth of clean technology economy in the region. And to tell us more about it, we receive here Emmit Owens, Interim Executive Director of the Research Triangle Cleantech Cluster. Can I say it? RTCC?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Well, Owens has been with RTCC since December 2013, previously working as a member recruitment. He also worked as a regional coordinator for the North Carolina Biotechnology Center. He has a master's degree of public administration from University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and also an art degree in government from Campbell University. Hello, Emmit. Thank you very, very much for having accepted our invitation for Participate or Connect Talks Global. Hello.
Hi. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you and to share more about the Research Triangle and the Research Triangle Cleantech Cluster.
Great. So I think we could start this conversation asking you to tell us a little bit more about the cluster, its creation, and main purposes.
Yes, certainly. So back in the 2009, 2010 timeframe, this is before I formally became involved with RTCC, our regional economic development organization, the Research Triangle Regional Partnership, was approached by an international group known as the International Cleantech Network. I'm going to abbreviate it to the ICN. They approached us and let us know that we actually had quite a cluster of clean tech companies here in the Research Triangle. And so our regional economic development leaders got together and met with some of the stakeholders that the ICN had identified to start having conversations about creating the clean tech cluster. And so, this over the next course of several years, the leadership of the Research Triangle Cleantech Research Triangle Regional Partnership stood up the cluster. And so, and they did that by really listening to what the industry leaders had to say about the Research Triangle Cleantech Cluster. And so, the key questions that they asked before standing it up was what could be done to strengthen and accelerate the growth of the cluster, and what could drive value to those members. And so that's really kind of the kicking off point of the Research Triangle Cleantech Cluster. We didn't even know what we had sitting in our backyard. Someone had to tell us, actually, there's this new industry sector called cleantech, and you all are perfectly positioned to be a global leader in the sector. And so that's really sort of the origins of how we began. And again, the key thing was connecting individually with some of the key businesses in the region to understand their needs, and then figuring out collectively what could be done to bring industry players together. And I guess a key point that I'll make here is that in some areas you may see that government funding is really used to create and stand up clusters, economic clusters. In our case, actually, it's all private funding for the most part. Up until 2019, we took no government dollars unless they were membership. And so it was really, if a government was a part of us and government funding was a part of it, it was because they were a member of our organization and we needed to create some value for them. So it's kind of a unique, way to start up a cluster, I think. Not too unique in the United States, but unique in terms of a perspective for abroad.
Okay, it seems like the association between universities, government, and the private sector, now that you have explained it, has been ideal. It has been an ideal format through RTCC, leverage projects, create synergies, and consolidate technological and economic development in North Carolina. Could you detail the effective participation of each one of these players?
Yeah. And so what I will say is how we kind of approach the effective participation is that we try to connect stakeholders organically and purposefully. And so what do I mean by that really is that we like to host events around a certain topic. You could, whether it be smart cities or some kind of specific smart grid technology. And that's the purposeful kind of interaction. So we're bringing stakeholders that are interested in a similar topic area. And then at the end of that event, and it's a short burst of content, maybe 45 minutes to an hour. And then we try to leave an equal amount of time for networking on the back end as well, so that people can enjoy connecting with each other, whether it's about what they just heard and some of the questions that maybe some of the audience members had, or whatever the case might be. It's really trying to figure out the right mix of purposeful and organic networking in terms of events to really serve as a catalyst. And so I think the formal part of the event really allows people to get their creative juices flowing, so to speak. And so they can start connecting dots and how things might relate to the projects that they're working on or the ideas that they have. And so really RTCC's role is to invite the key stakeholders from the government, academia, and business sectors, and to provide them a platform to really connect with each other. And so a little bit more in the operational side, our board of directors includes stakeholders from our 3 tier 1 universities. And so the Research Triangle region, North Carolina, is fortunate to have Duke University, the University of North Carolina, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and then North Carolina State University. They're all 3 tier 1s. I think they're within 20 miles of each other. And so there's this really great synergy that exists amongst the universities and also amongst the industry as well. And so those tier 1 universities serve on our board. And so we always start our board meetings off with information sharing. So we do kind of a round robin. Tell us about the work that you're doing. Tell us about some industry trends you're seeing or observing. And so that really helps us try to connect some dots. And so if someone's describing something maybe on the agenda, they'll be like, well, what about this? And how does this program that you've launched relate to the work that we're doing over here? And so that's another way that we kind of have some effective participation amongst the stakeholders. And additionally, and we may get into this a little bit deeper as we get into our conversation, we launched a program called the North Carolina Cleantech Corridor. And so our partner is an accelerator, a virtual accelerator in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so for those who are not familiar with North Carolina, Raleigh is in the center of the state. Charlotte's about 150 miles south and west of Raleigh. And so, but they're a major tech hub, becoming a major tech hub, according to some recent reports. And they are a regional banking hub. And so they're trying to figure out, and they're also home to Duke Energy, which is one of the largest utilities in the United States. And so by creating this corridor between Raleigh and Charlotte, we're able to bring together municipalities, industry leaders, academics, to talk about some of the cool technology that may be deploying or that they may have interest in, or things like that. And so that's really been a great success in a way that we've been able to effectively include the 3 diverse stakeholder sets that you've identified. So.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, but at its foundation in 2009, the priority objectives of RTCC were aimed to add clean technologies, right?
It was one of the key tenets. I think clean tech, the acceleration of the adoption of clean technology and the acceleration of the creation of new and novel technologies was a key consideration. Economic development was also a very key consideration as well. So to grow the regional ecosystem of clean tech was also an important consideration in addition to the development of clean technologies.
And today, what other objectives or goals have been incorporated to RTCC activity scope?
Sure. So, and since our incorporation, a number of things have changed in regard to the objectives and scope. Originally, RTCC had 3 main strategies. It was to market and brand the region. It was business development, business growth and business development, and then community and industry engagement. And really, when you boiled all that down, the major emphasis was on marketing and branding the region across the U.S. and abroad, sort of waving the flag that this is a great place to do business, that we have these global and national leaders in clean tech that are here. And so that works well for a few years. Again, back to my point about we're privately funded. And so stakeholders could get behind that. And so as an organization, that is funded by business, we realized we needed to do more to position our members as thought leaders in the clean tech space. So in other words, we needed to figure out ways we could both accomplish our original goal around growing and accelerating clean tech in the region, and also creating value for our investors. And so we've actually had to be a bit creative about how we have create and pursue opportunities which serve multiple purposes. So for example, if we participate in a trade show, which we often did pre-COVID, we use those events not only to raise awareness about the region's clean tech strength, but also to seek out speaking opportunities which could position our members as thought leaders on a national stage, and to also help our members with business development. And so, it's that trying to figure out that how can I, and forgive the saying, but how can I, hit two targets with one stone, so to speak. So, and as I mentioned a second ago, the clean tech corridor is probably a really good example of how we have shifted not to just focusing on technology, but focusing on the actual deployment of technology. And so again, we have there are three main components to that work of the corridor. And one of them is the Clean Tech Catalyst Accelerator, which I mentioned our partner in Jules, which is based in Charlotte, North Carolina, leads. And basically that accelerator allows businesses and government to interact with startups from North Carolina, as well as across the world, to learn about technologies being developed to solve some of the world's most critical problems, like climate change. And so this virtual model creates connections, which leads to initial conversations, and hopefully we get some technology deployment out of the different cohorts. And there's been some success with that. And then we also, as part of that, have a corridor committee, which is a platform where we allow industry and municipalities and other stakeholders to convene to learn from each other. So you have industry learning from industry, you have municipalities learning from municipalities, and you have industry learning from municipalities, and vice versa. And so our ecosystem of events, we also have is also part of the accelerator. We have an ecosystem of events that we have, and so really it's about this more focused and organic networking. So purposeful and organic networking is also a key component of that. So our objective has shifted really in terms of how from, being economic development focused and trying to focus on technologies, to be really being thoughtful about how we can create value for everyone involved. And sometimes more value will be created for other stakeholders in, certain years, and, it'll be reversed. Some other stakeholders might not get as much value in 1 year as the others, but they're still taking away something. So.
Okay, I was going to ask you about the main contributions or main projects, but you already detailed some of them, right?
Yeah. And so, it really boils down to us serving as a platform to connect stakeholders. I view our role as somewhat as a catalyst for conversations, whether that leads to collaboration between university researchers and industry, or businesses finding some opportunity to deploy solutions or collaborate with business on a project. In terms of actual growth, we've monitored that for a bit. Since 2009, we've added about 1.3 billion in recurring economic impact to the Research Triangle region. So that's the clean tech sector as a whole, which is pretty broadly defined. But in terms of recurring impact, 1.3 billion, and I'll put a caveat on that and say that hasn't been. It's a bit dated. It's probably much more significant than that. We just haven't. It's not been while our focus was really economic development and marketing and branding, it's shifted some. So we monitor the number periodically, but it's not an ongoing metric we continually update. So in terms of the regional impact, it's been quite significant. And when we compare ourselves to other benchmarks in the United States, we are one of the leaders, top 5, top 2 or 3, depending on the metrics that you look at and how you create the methodology behind them. So
Okay, and considering projects for smart and connected cities, what contributions are TCC already made? Could you give us a little bit more details specifically on this subject?
Yeah. So in terms of smart and connected cities, I think I'll provide some context. I think in the United States, each municipality has their own autonomy, and so they start at different places. So where one city might value, you know, smart streetlights, connected streetlights,
Okay.
which can serve multiple points from improving lighting, increasing efficiency, serving as a network for devices to connect to. Other cities might value smart buildings, and so improving the efficiency of their buildings. And so what we try to do is help each other educate. We try to educate one another, and so what I'll say is some of our work through the Jules Accelerator has led to companies partnering with a vendor. For example, Duke Energy partnered with this company called Dynamex, and they are working to help capture some information around municipalities' carbon footprint and reduction. And so that's probably an example, a more concrete example. But what I will say is that it's different cities come at it from a different place, and so it's tough to we try to find regional synergies and focus on educating in some sense. So air quality sensors is a great example. Last year, it was identified that a few municipalities in our state had interest in deploying air quality sensors to determine, basically how much pollution is coming in certain places and what can we do to help control this, and just to have the data. And so we brought in some of our industry members to educate. We brought in some of our government members to educate. And so basically we created a learning opportunity for everyone involved in sharing best practices and figuring out how we can come together and solve problems regionally. So that's kind of our big initiative at the Cleantech Corridor. And, it's everything from startups and trying to get them engaged with the community to educating each other, as I earlier indicated. So.
Great. And do you see RTCC as a possible model to be replicated in other countries, in South America, for example? And what will be the ideal conditions to create a cluster, for instance, in São Paulo?
Yeah, what I'll say is that in some ways, RTCC is a possible model in terms of how we create opportunities to connect. But based off what I've seen across the US and on a more limited basis globally, each cluster has to figure out what assets they have and how they can best organize. Originally the Research Triangle Cleantech Cluster was all about marketing and branding and helping us establish a presence globally and nationally that we are a leader to attract talent, to attract companies. And as it has evolved, we've pivoted to meet the market demands. So you sort of have to figure out in some ways what string you need to pull initially to get all the other stakeholders to come together and create the organization. For us, we had to go to the industry and say, what are your needs? What are your challenges? What keeps you up at night? How could we help solve that? And it also, we're a bit unique in that we receive, up until recently, like I said, 2019, we received no government funding. And so trying to figure out how you drive value to stakeholders is also a key consideration. If you're playing in that public-private partnership model, it's really key to try to figure out what can you give your community that no one else is providing, so to speak. Where is that gap? I think so that may be something to consider. I would say there are things, if I look across another great cluster is Cleantech San Diego, and they're a really a strong cluster, and they have a number of different mechanisms that they have a city in San Diego that's really interested and has put money towards funding smart city solutions. They have a state government that's really progressive, and so that's what the position that they play in because of the surrounding environment. And so for us, we've done a lot of really wonderful things in North Carolina, but we haven't figured out what the exact mechanism is to help fund some of this decarb effort. And so private industry stepping in. And so we have to figure out how we as a organization continue to drive value to them. And so it's different organizations have different sets of circumstances. And what I like to do and what we actually do is we kind of survey best practices across the different clusters. So we'll actually look at what everyone's doing. We'll even include a few international clusters and say, here's a program that could work here. Here's something that they do that could work, that works there, that we may be able to incorporate. And so it's that kind of thinking, picking and choosing what's going to work for you. I know that's not a wonderful formulaic way. It's not a linear way of thinking, but it is something that works for us pretty well. Figuring out what does somebody else do well that we might be able to learn from. So
it's fundamental to have this collaborative idea of this synergy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about collaboration and figuring out what stakeholders can you bring in that want to be a part of the solutions. And so it's, we're very fortunate to have very forward-thinking companies that are interested in engaging with the community, interested in making global impact on our communities and abroad. And so we're very fortunate, and there's a lot to learn from us. And I think there's also a lot from us to learn from others as well. So
good. Well, unfortunately, we have reached the end of our conversation. I would like to thank you once again, Emmit, for your participation, and I will take this opportunity to reinforce that Connected Smart Cities and Mobility has as main mission to bring together the several players of the urban ecosystem in Brazil in favor of a more sustainable and connected cities with the citizen as a central figure. Thank you for participating, Emmit.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate sharing the opportunity to share more about the Research Triangle region and the Cleantech Cluster. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you're invited to visit Brazil when it will be possible. Who knows when?
Yes, that's on my bucket list. I'll see what I can do.
Okay. Well, thank you all for the audience, and we will see each other at the next Connected Talks Global. Thank you very much. Bye.